Well, good morning to all. They're telling me we can start. So welcome to this session on crowdfunding. My name is Teonichi Oda. I'm a journalist with Care News. It's players in the commitment. We're speaking of social and solidarity economy. Thank you for the audience and those who follow us online. During 90 minutes, we're going to ask ourselves if participative investment or crowdfunding is a sustainable solution for a 000 world, or is it only a drop of water in the ocean? And we'll take your questions, the questions among the audience and online, and our experts will answer them in the last 15 minutes. So I'll start giving a quick definition of crowdfunding. And I guess you all have a notion of what it is. So crowdfunding, it's an exchange of funds out of the institutional banking system in order to finance a project through an online platform. We'll go into details on this with our experts. I'm going to ask ourselves many questions along this issue. As the pandemic sped up, crowdfunding, what are the issues created by this pandemic, and politically speaking, what we can do to develop crowdfunding. And in order to answer all those questions for experts, welcome to you all. Thank you to join us in this forum organized by Convergence. Aurélien Donnet, good morning. You're the Associate CEO, Finance and Investment with Acted. It's an international corporation NGO. This NGO supports 20 million people with a budget of 450,000 euros in 2021. And you're operating in 40 countries, and Acted uses several tools, microfinance, like Oxus. You're going to explain us what it is, and you lend 30 million euros. We'll come back to this later on. Welcome. Among the other experts, Aurélien Aubeuf. Oh, excuse me, Aurélien Arthur. I'm mixing people. So, Arthur Aubeuf, you co-founded in 2019 Time for the Planet with 5 other people. So, Time for the Planet is an association willing to collect 1 billion euros to fight climate change. It's an ambitious project, and in order to collect this amount, you offer citizens to become shareholders. You've collected 100 million euros by now. I don't know the exact figure. And thanks to the 100,000 shareholders who have joined your project. And at your side, Julie, who also is working for Time for the Planet. She has invested both personal money, and she's investing her time. You explain why you decided to commit to crowdfunding. And the last expert, Daniel van Manen, who is using a headphone because he speaks French, but he prefers listening to English, and he prefers speaking English. So you're a financial director and an investment manager for Lenderhand. Lenderhand, it's a Dutch crowdfunding platform financing entrepreneurial projects in the south. And thanks to those loans, more than 8 million jobs have been created. For instance, just to quote an example, more than 70,000 solar installations have been deployed in the south. So, to go to the core of our issue, in 2020, crowdfunding has gone over 1 million euros with an increase of more than 60% in a year. So over the last year, we were really watching some progress. So when I speak about this billion euros, real estate is a large part of this crowdfunding solutions. And here we're going to delve into a very peculiar issue with the crowdfunding for the good cause. Just before, I'd like one of you to explain the difference between participative financing and crowdfunding. Could you explain the difference, please? Arthur, would you do it? Can you hear me well? My vision is very simple. It is very simple. When you join a crowdfunding, crowdlending, whatever the word, you become co-ownership, you become shareholder associate to the project. You may take part in it. This is our case with ACT. It's not only a donation. You give money and then you'll follow what your money becomes from afar. No, our vision is the people are really co-owners. They co-own our company, the same title as everyone else. So they take part in general assemblies. They take part in the decision-making process. But we can complete this definition. I'm not an expert in definitions on this. Perhaps just to add something, everything that has to do with getting the owner of a company, but what lend a hand does, which is rather loans, debts to structure so that they can develop. This is what we do with acted auctions for the South. And third, donations with a financial counterpart, but platforms of crowdfunding to help a colleague for a birthday or a special occasion. If you have a relative who wants to launch a music band or produce an album, and will ask crowdfunding to come and help finance his music album, and he will reward those who contributed with a concert ticket or copies of his music album, and that's what is interesting. It's the flexibility of this type of financing, able to finance several projects, eco-finance, cultural projects, development projects. So thank you for this framing of our issue. It's important to really define things. I'll come back to you, Arthur. With Time for the Planet, you've bet on citizen funding, especially for the environmental sector, and you think that this crowdfunding is really efficient to finance innovation. Can you explain us why, and explain in the background what Time for the Planet is?
We deploy without innovation to fight climate change to an international level. And everyone can become a co-owner associated to the project in 1 minute on our website. This enables us to be a movement that everyone can grasp for this movement to grow. So first answer. Second question. The companies that we create around these innovations, we would share the ownership, and everyone would copy and paste these over the planet, or around the planet. So it's a way to do R&D at a very wide scale, because it's a duty to share these improvements with those who own the license. And it's a way also for us to have a true effect on the greenhouse, because all these people who will duplicate an activity via the open source can reshare the tons of greenhouse effect gas. And also it's charity based, and it's not in order to earn money, but to combat again the greenhouse gas. And so it's profitable, it generates money, but this money is going to be systematically reinvested into the creation of new companies. So this is the time. And this is the reason why we think that citizens are very important. First, because in our case, when we create time we wanted to react, and we were wondering how to have impact. We heard that this is the biggest challenge in humanity's history. But we wanted to create like a vehicle, or a vernacular tool in such a way that everyone, even with €1, could contribute to this action. So for us citizens, it's very important. Citizens are very important because it's a way, because people want to act, they want to do something, and we enable them to do something even with €1. So it's a way to have great innovations, great entrepreneurs to carry these innovations. And there are a number of many things come up to us, and thanks to this huge number of citizens who take part, who participate to this, and all the other levels of funding, because it's not only about the citizens, it's also about the companies who can join in. But all these people, would join in because they want to contribute to this action. Thank you. So next to you, Julie. Julie, you've decided to become a shareholder for Time and the Planet. So you've decided to become an associate to this. Why have you decided to become an associate to Time for the Planet? And why your interest for Time for the Planet? Answer. Well, I've always been sensitive to nature, the environment. And then as I grew up, I had access to videos and so on. I could see that there was a problem with regards to climate, the nature, the environment. So I changed the way I consume things. I changed my consumption. I bought from websites like WWF and so on. And I spoke about all that around me. I realized that many people wanted to act but didn't know how to do things. And someone told me about Time for the Planet. And it's very interesting because it's about getting money to create companies, and to act at the source of the problem, namely at the level of the production of what we consume. And I liked it. I like this idea. So for me, it's not an investment. It's rather a gift. I would have done the same thing. It's very similar to, when you act in favor to WWF. It's wanted something moderate, quiet, sound, not in excess, with a lot of communication, transparent, where everyone's kept updated with what is taking place. So you immediately trusted this project? Yes. I trusted it immediately because, first, there's more and more information with regards to time. It's broadcast on different networks. There was a documentary on a TV channel. I watched it, and this has helped me trusting time even more. And, I looked for information, and I knew that time is credible, sound, and safe. But my friend harassed me as well, so to speak. Now I harass my friends. I harass people in my turn. So in the room, in the audience, anybody who invested money on a platform, raise your hand. Raise your hand if you've already contributed to invested in a website, on a platform, invested on a platform. Raise your hand. Well, with the mask, we don't know what you feel. Would you like to tell us more about your history, your story? I'm also an associate at Time, so I don't know whether what I will say will be an added value. But anyway, I have the same background as Julie's. We can be made aware with we would do things more tangible over time, but still, there's some frustration. We want to do more and more, and but we would feel too small, to be able to do something. That's the feeling we would have. But thanks to Time for the Planet, we do have the feeling we can do something at a small scale, at our level. We do have the feeling we can have an impact. We have an impact indeed. So this was the moment for Time for the Planet. So 3 speakers loans instead of two. So Daniel, the model of lend-a-hand is different because it's loans. You explained we explained the difference earlier. And with your Dutch platform, it's a way to lend money to companies of the South countries for those entities who have a project with an impact. So you're going to present lend-a-hand, and how, in your view, can crowdfunding bring a tangible answer response to the southern countries, to the countries in emerging countries?
So first, maybe to briefly introduce lend-a-hand. Probably most of you will not have heard of lend-a-hand. Lend-a-hand is a Netherlands-based crowdfunding platform. It was established in 2012, and it is a platform that is indeed dedicated to funding businesses in emerging markets. And the founder of Lend-a-hand traveled the world a little bit in 2011 and 2012, and he realized that globally it's businesses that drive job creation, it's businesses that drive economic growth. But in most countries, that's true in France and in the Netherlands, but certainly also in emerging markets, businesses are small businesses. Are not the large corporates. Of course, every country has large multinational companies, but the real drivers of growth are the small family businesses with 1, 2, 5, 10 employees. The problem is in many emerging markets that those small and medium enterprises, in English SMEs, those companies don't have the same access to finance as we have here in the West. You cannot go to the bank and get a loan. Maybe there is not even a bank around, or you don't have a bank account, or you don't have collateral to pledge. So he realized that on the one hand, those businesses needed funding to be able to grow and then to hire more employees and to become successful. On the other hand, he realized there are many people in the West that have large savings accounts. And those savings accounts are at the bank, and it doesn't do much. First of all, already for a very long time, interest rates are very low. Back then in 2012, it was maybe still 2%. I think today it's more like 0% or even negative, but it was already low then. But it's not only low interest rates, it's also there are many people that want to do something good with their money. Now, previously, that would have been difficult for any individual lender or investor to use that money to help an entrepreneur in Ghana, right? You could only maybe go to a bank or to a wealth management part of the bank or to a fund, but then for a bank to accept you as a client, you would need to bring 10,000 euros, 25,000 euros. But thanks to technology, crowdfunding started to arise, and it made it possible for to already join those platforms and start investing and lending with very small amounts. So this is where the founders then decided to set up this platform and to allow individual investors to start to lend, starting with 50 euros in emerging markets. Now in 2021, we've been able to lend about 110 million euros through our platform in the Netherlands, as well as our platform in the UK. And that is all with small loans by individual investors. So we have about 10,000 investors that invest in emerging markets, more than 25 countries. We have, over the past 8 years, extended loans to about 45, somewhere between 45 and 50 companies. And so what we allow those companies to do, we go through an extensive due diligence process, because we want to do a good job. We want to do our homework, because in the end of the day, we're going to ask individual investors to put part of their savings into a country that they've probably never been, a company that they for sure have never heard of, and we give them a return. We believe in the model of that it should have some financial return. I can come back to that point, but still, it is a relatively risky investment, and that's why we do feel that we need to do a good job in analyzing the companies and making sure. Well, you can never make sure, but we try to do a good analysis that the investment opportunities that we offer are good opportunities to generate a financial and, of course, an impact return. All the companies that are using our platform should have a form of impact, and in our case, that could be financial inclusion, economic growth, or access to energy, or fighting hunger and poverty. Those are our key focus areas.
Merci Daniel. Et ce qui va...
Thank you very much, Daniel. What is going to be interesting also is to compare the room for citizen investment, participative investment, crowdfunding in the Netherlands, and this can be the subject for comparison. But before we give the floor to Aurélien from Acted, we're going to watch a video of those people who've had loans thanks to Lend a Hand. Thank you.
L'objectif de l'effort aujourd'hui, il s'agit de donner de la lumière à toutes les personnes qui n'en ont pas jusqu'ici. Aujourd'hui, on a une bonne partie de la population camerounaise qui reste encore dans le noir. Je suis responsable de mettre tout le monde en route et de me rassurer que tout le monde fait son travail. Parce qu'aujourd'hui, pour dire simplement, on a un peu plus de 200 agents sur le terrain. Il faut se rassurer que tout le monde déjà a ce qu'il faut pour travailler, c'est-à-dire le matériel déjà de travail et les kits à vendre. Et après, il faut se rassurer que justement, ce travail est fait. Donc, faire un suivi, appeler, savoir est-ce que ces personnes sont sur le terrain.
Qu'est-ce que ça vous fait quand vous voyez en fait que plein de gens veulent investir ensemble dans vos opérations?
Ça nous fait comprendre qu'il faut être en train d'aller sur la bonne voie. Et surtout que ce que nous on fait sur le terrain est bien vu en fait, est bien vu par tous. Et que les gens, même au-delà des frontières, savent ce qu'on fait.
They used to use candles before, and they didn't know when the grid was going to come.
So there's no idea.
All they had is candles. It is a lamp torch. Torch and candle. And the torch doesn't last 2 days, and the battery goes.
So what all like basic things, everyday life things can you do now that you have this that you couldn't do before?
So she's very happy because the product is first of all a quality product, and once the kids go to school and they come back at night, they're able to do homework, study their lessons. So she's really happy.
Thank you very much.
Nze mutespatience mbeera nabyewanga omulimu gwange gwa dduuka ali sirina kyenkozesa nga sinafuna sola kubanga lemaze nga nkozesa sola lya myezi nga 6 mugaso gwenfunyemu okuganyulwa mu sola eno lwa kikiri nti emirimu gyange gitambula bulungi okusinga bwe nali nga sinafuna sola. Bakasitoma bange beeyongerako obungi okusinga oli bwe nali nga sinafuna sola. Ebyokunywa byentunda biba binyogoga so nga ate nali sina sola ebyokunywa byali tebitambula bulungi. Sola eyo sigisangamu buzibu lwa nsonga teteeka nnyo ku pressure ne bwemba sinafuna ssente zaayo nsigala ngikozesa nenjitekuba tebasifunamu buzibu nti oba eyinza okuteeka pressure nti bwemba sinabafuna ssente zaayo ne basalako kati kyo tekintuukangako so ssente zaayo wenzifunira wenziteerayo nesigala nga ngikozesa emirimu gyange gigenda mu maaso tegitaatagana.
Voilà, super. C'est toujours intéressant de voir l'application concrète et voilà, de pouvoir mettre des images qui viennent accompagner nos débats un peu plus théoriques. On va passer à Aurélien Donnet. Acted s'intéresse de près au financement participatif. Vous avez déjà quelques expériences d'utilisation, vous allez nous en parler et vous souhaitez encore plus vous en emparer pour répondre donc aux besoins humanitaires. Donc je vous propose déjà de nous détailler vos différentes actions dans cette réponse introductive. Et du coup, la question qui vient par la suite, vous allez nous dire si vous croyez que le financement participatif peut financer les ODD, donc Objectifs de développement durable, et notamment ce qui nous intéresse dans votre cas, la coopération internationale.
Interests us, which is has to do with international cooperation. Thank you for those very interesting exchanges. It's very interesting to see what happens in this world of crowdfunding. Acted consider this very interesting for multiple reasons. We're an NGO funded by public lenders, so the 350 million euros spent by Acted are funded by the UN, by states. It comes from income taxes from people like you and me, paying go further upwards into envelopes, budgets, and then redistributed to NGOs like us. So we've got a lot of intermediaries and a lot of time, nearly 18 months between the time you pay your taxes and the money reaches us. So through the digital tool that crowdfunding enables, it speeds up this rhythm of between the end funder and us. So that's why in the year of 2007 we co-created a crowdfunding platform in France, Pioneer, called Babylon. And its objective was to finance through solidarity loans with the interest rate lower than usual, and to help entrepreneurs in the south, in countries where it's complicated to find public funding. So we are interested in this sector, but very clearly nowadays we don't belong to this sector, and it's why I took part in this roundtable. I'm rather an outsider to see how we see that we that are on the ground. So there are multiple funding method. We saw this with the lender and then Time for a Planet. It goes from the loan to the equity, which means assets in a company, the capital in a company, sorry, and actors of the development. We try to go further beyond the traditional donation. We work progressively with blended finance, mixed funding, trying to look for funding through subsidies to end users and to companies, because we assist 200 micro companies on the ground with for startups. We can complete our intervention through subsidies with loans. We are not found locally, so it's interesting at this level. And we told it in your introduction, the sector is in evolution. We can sense it in France. You were mentioning the billion euros. I think it is multiplied by 6, the amounts funded, collected in France, and the same increase in the humanitarian sector. A very small part of this billion euros, less than 100 million, that ends up with humanitarian operators, but this little part has increased by 5 or 6 since 2015. So it let us think that it's interesting in terms of the financement of SDGs. Is crowdfunding a solution to that? We think it's part of the solution. The UN thought that in 2015 there were missing $2.5 billion to finance sustainable development, mainly for the countries that most need it. So 2.5 billion, I can't fathom what it represents. So it's the budget of France yearly that is missing to achieve the SDG goals by 2030. So we are speaking a huge amount, and alone with the subsidies and donations from the general public, we won't make it. We need to attract the money coming from investment capital to reach such huge amounts, and especially in the humanitarian sector in 2020. Out of $38 billion needed to meet the needs of 140 billion people in the world, only half of it has been collected. It means very concretely that 250 million people across the world have received little or no help compared to the help needed. So 2020, it was really high because of COVID. On this 38 billion, only 10 billion were dedicated to the COVID-19 crisis. It has impacted not only on the health side, but on the economic side too, in the countries where we operate. So 38 billion means 15% of the overall savings amount from the French in 2020. It's 40% of Apple's profit in 2020. So we can find those 19 billion euros. I'm writing to Apple right now to try to find out if they can help on the humanitarian sector. So we want to mobilize crowdfunding alongside traditional finance. So we think there is a huge potential to meet the needs of and achieve those SDG goals. If the staff of Apple is watching us, please answer our call. And you started answering this question, which is the core of this roundtable, which is to know whether crowdfunding can be an answer, if crowdfunding is enough to meet the challenge of the South Hemisphere or of the environmental issues. I'd like to come back to the difference between loan, the way you work through loans, and you was rather on the side of equity. So, Arthur, can you explain us, according to you, which are the advantages and drawbacks of both approaches to crowdfunding? To start with a loan, you get your money back. It's a first advantage you can see on the financial side. The investment, we hope getting our money back. We've got ROI, TRI, internal. In equity, it could be an advantage to recover money when it's speculative money. So the advantage for us, we want people to be co-owners with their money, and they participate in the growth of our company. They don't want to make money. They want their money to be useful and impactful. People being, I don't know what the president, CEO was saying. I understand what you want me to do, but take me to the street and force me doing it. So if we can suggest other matters, because something is happening, it's very strong, and it's stronger than only a signature or the traditional petition. So with our money together, we're really strong, and we can achieve many things, but it won't be enough. And he said it very well. But on the contrary, if we are together, and we are thousands of us, we can go and find other players, and we can scale up. That's what the upside. I don't have an exhaustive list of upsides and downside, but it's already something. Daniel, could you complete all the advantages and drawbacks of both models?
I think first and foremost, you need all the models, right? And whether it's donations or capital investments or loans, I think all of them have a place in the ecosystem. For example, we do loans, but it's very difficult to do loans to real startup companies, because a startup company needs time to market their service or their product to generate revenues. So you don't want to give a startup a loan which is a heavy burden on them. So I think the model that you have is much more suitable for pure startups. At the same time, the market of debt globally is a lot larger than the market for equity or capital investments. So there is a role for debt to play. Also, as you know, we support businesses in, over 25 emerging markets. We do that from the Netherlands. As a shareholder, you become an owner of that business. And you then also have a certain responsibility to make decisions on that company. For us, it would be practically very difficult to be in a decision-making process in all those countries, in all those companies. So, from a practical point of view, I think that has some advantages. Likewise, we find it very important that we, as Western investors, do not necessarily become the owners of the businesses. We want those entrepreneurs to thrive and to keep the ownership of the businesses that they have created. So, yeah, there are definitely pros and cons, and we need both types of investment, I would say.
Aurélien, je ne sais pas si vous voulez.
Aurélien, do you want to add anything? No, I think Daniel summed it up very well. We need both models. We see on the ground we have both companies who are starting up and who need fast capital and even donations for the launch. And more mature structures, we need debt loans. So both models are important, and loans can work very well with micro investors. That's what we do with Acted Auctions in Central Asia to assist the procurement of tools. We need permanently need funds which are paid back with an interest rate so that they can buy tools for farming, for instance, farming production, and it enables the development of the economic activity. So all models are welcome. And that's the idea of this roundtable and this version 3.0. Everybody is welcome around the table to advance sustainable development.
Other topic and other question. The assets of crowdfunding, one of these assets is transparency, traceability, tracking. And I imagine this is even more the case, even more important for those investing. So Julie, as a shareholder at Time for the Planet, how do you get informed of the progress of the processes of the funding? And in this question, and as you answer, you can also tell us if it's something which is important, this transparency, whether it's important for you as well. Well, my friend has made a research to get information about that. And also Arthur every week sends a state of progress to inform all the investors as for what is being done, the progress over the actions and so on. But also it's possible for me to go on the website and see what's taking place. But anyway, everything is transparent. So I can imagine that indeed this is something very important, transparency, especially when someone wants to become a citizen investor. Indeed, I gave an amount of money because I wanted to commit myself, because that's the most efficient, effective way for me that I've found to try and do something tangibly. I'm not necessarily going to go and seek the information, but anyway, this information is going to come to me every week, and every week I would watch the video that gives me information on the what is taking place. Aurélien at Acted, I think that this is transparency is important. It's tracking, traceability is very important as well. So, in your view, how can crowdfunding can be the guarantee of this transparency and this tracking? Well, as for the first part of your question, yes, indeed, transparency is a key element for us. Compliance, transparency, and so on. So we're going to levy funds in France from donors, sponsors all over the world. But, it's also about countries in crisis, in the Middle East, in Asia, in Afghanistan. We know what's taking place there. So anyway, we're actors in a crisis situation with humanitarian actions anyway. So it's very important for us to know what's taking place, what's done with every single euros invested. So transparency is very important. Now, when it comes to crowdfunding, how can this be guarantee of this transparency? Well, indeed, it is a guarantee of transparency, especially between the investor and the entity receiving the funds. But I would like to add also that it's all very important. The transparency is very important, especially when the funds go far away, in a country which is far away. The sector, the crowdfunding industry, so to speak, has interest in putting in place partnerships with all the different professions, in such a way that the projects have to be relevant to the needs on the field. Also, the follow-up, the supervisors, the supervision of the actions in place have to be monitored, so to speak, because the implementation has to be monitored. And also there must be an assessment of the impact in the end. That's the end of the chain. All the projects around the table aim at having an impact that to improve the situation of the population or the entrepreneurs or the targeted population. So assessing this impact is very important for us as well. And that's why I think that in order to be fully transparent and to have full traceability, the actors have to associate with the on-the-ground actors. It's a win-win situation, in such a way that we can achieve a win-win situation. So what we understand in your answer is that even at the core of the organizations that are funded, it brings this transparency brings in good practices also at an internal level. Am I correct? Actually, it pushes forward the entity which is going to manage the project to be directly in relation with the funder. This involves real-time reporting. So indeed, this is fostered, but this has to be completed with the know-how from the on-the-ground actors in such a way that it's not only about a photo and sending a photo plus a report. It's quite easy, but the most complex thing is to make sure that the need has been properly identified based on real needs, because with €1 you can do 1,000 of different things based on a specific issue, a specific topic that has to be tackled in these countries. So indeed, this on-the-ground part, assessment of the needs, follow-up of the projects, monitoring of the projects, and the investors, all that has to be clear and transparent. Arthur, time for the plans. I suppose there are tangible things that you've implemented in order to guarantee this transparency and this trustability. Can you tell us more about that and also answer the same question when it comes to the interest of crowdfunding with regards to transparency and trustability? This is very important for us, especially when it comes to the environment, and everyone seems to be in need to be more trustful. That's why it's important to be more and more transparent. And we thought we want to be fully transparent, because we come from nowhere, so to speak. So we have to be absolutely transparent. So our accounts are absolutely made public. If something is spent, people would know about that. Each and every expense is going to be published. So our bylaws are published. People can read in our bylaws all the commitments that we've taken, and also these legal matters, all these things that constrains us to be absolutely transparent. In France, we can't say, it's not possible to say we can't distribute dividends. We've chosen not to distribute dividends, but in France we have a lawyer in France, and we told this lawyer we want to find a solution because we don't want to distribute dividends. And he explained to us, well, you can distribute a dividend if you do something, in a legal way. But actually, we had to do something. We had to comply to a law that existed in 1950 in France. But anyway, for the moment we're voluntary, but if everything is mentioned in our statuses, in our bylaws, plus the wages of our staff and so on and so forth. If one day, there is a wage. But anyway, all the people who take part to Time for the Planet can participate to the meetings, even when the meetings are at a very high level. And they can see everything, who would vote what, why, how, and so on. We want as much information to be made available to people for the transparency to be at the highest level. Same question to Daniel. How, with your platform, can you guarantee this transparency, this traceability? And in your view, do you think crowdfunding can be the guarantee of this transparency and this traceability?
Yeah, I obviously agree with the other speakers that transparency is key in this sector. If you're asking ordinary people on the street to trust you with their money, you have to be absolutely transparent what you're doing with their money, what impact it has created. We try to do that in, let me give you two examples. So when you make loans to emerging market businesses, this is a risky type of investment. So unfortunately, sometimes it does not go well. So we've had some cases in our history whereby the companies were not able to pay back the loans. Then, as a platform, you should not try to find excuses. You should not try to hide that. You should just be open and transparent and tell the people that their money may not come back. Tell them whatever you have tried to do to recover that money. And that's what we do on a monthly basis. Every month we send to our full base of investors in a particular project which has a delay. We give them an update on the situation. And what we see is that when such a case happens, we get maybe 50 reactions from the crowd, of which one may be complaining and telling us that we've done a bad job, and 49 would say, well, anyway, I'm grateful that I could help this company, and I'm grateful for your transparency. So I think that's key. Another example that I can recommend to all of you, what we've done, I think now for a couple of years, we have a dedicated page on our website which explains our shortcomings. And we try to update that every year, and we try to be transparent in the stuff that we wish that we have done better already, but that is still work in progress. And people really appreciate that very much. One of those things is that we want to measure impact better, and that is not easy, and it is easy to always focus on growing the business, finding more entrepreneurs, finding more crowd. But this year, the board of Lend a Hand has said 2021 is the year of impact measurement, because we have to show to the crowd what the actual impact is that they have created. So those are two examples, but it all comes down to the same thing. If you want people to support your business, you have to be absolutely 100% transparent.
Merci. On va revenir maintenant au titre de la conférence.
Thank you. Now we're going to go back to the title of the conference. crowdfunding sustainable solution for a triple zero world or just a drop in the ocean? So what is it the most efficient solution, or is it only one solution amongst many others? And can this solution not be the only answer to all the issues that we've mentioned? Arthur, as this was very well said, we need all the actors. There are thousands of initiatives, thousands of different ways to do things. There's not one single solution. Things are systemic. All the issues are systemic. That's why it's very important to keep doors open on that, because all the models can be interesting and virtuous, but I think that this crowdfunding is the basis and fundamental to involve people, to boost people for what we want in the future. And this is the entry door to an improvement, key improvement in the future. But it's very important that all the different kinds of solutions to be mentioned, to be existing and taken into account, acted. From a humanitarian point of view, I like the blended finance, especially the institutional resources next to the crowdfunding, because we don't always depend on the general public's sensitivity. Sometimes when it comes to communication, things are not optimal. Example, 2 years ago, there were massive floodings in Pakistan, and this was not covered or not mentioned at all by the media in France. Things were not understood by the general public. And when I talked by similar NGOs doing public money collecting, they told me that they removed this topic because nobody reacted on that. So you see, when it comes to crowdfunding, there's some very high reactivity, very immediate, this immediateness when it comes to crowdfunding. But when it comes to institutions, they can be backed by the citizens with taxes that are scaled up. That's the existing system. But I think that using crowdfunding and institutions helps to have something very consistent. Hence the importance of information to achieve, to reach the different citizens. Daniel, crowdfunding, institutional funding. Would you like to add something when it comes to the advantages, the drawbacks of each of these systems when it comes to funding?
Things are not meant to generate a financial return, for example, or are not meant to help with an equity investment or with a loan. Sometimes, if it comes to rescue situations or the situations right now that in Afghanistan, for example, or relief works in Haiti, it does not make sense to first start lengthy even though crowdfunding can be fast, but it can be 1 month perhaps to collect the money. Those people need help right now. So for sure, there's always going to be the need for immediate grant money. What is I think is interesting though, that I explained before, technology these days allows people to help, but there's also two other factors. The trust in banks, in governments, and in general in institutions has come down over the past years and decades, right? We had the financial crisis, we had there's a lot of political turmoil in the world, and so to give people the tools to act directly will increasingly become more important, I think. So that is a trend that won't go away. And on top of that, we have this huge thing of the climate crisis, right? And the youth is so much more aware now, I think, of these kind of themes than perhaps 2, 3, 4 decades away. So combining those trends, I would see a larger role of, let's say, direct funding models. But in the end, we will need banks, we will need governments, we will need NGOs and donations as well.
Bon, il y a toujours un moment où on parle Covid, donc.
There is always a moment when we speak about COVID. It has started with COVID. COVID had multiple effects. To start with, massive savings due to several health restrictions. The French have saved 140 billion euros according to recent figures. Another effect, the awareness. You're going to say a relative awareness about environmental issues and to take part in the world, in this afterworld. Do you think this period has been a momentum for the investment, and how did crowdfunding adapt to this new situation? Arthur Robeuf, would you start answering? Because I'm not an expert on this sector as a whole, but what we've seen. People have really saved a lot at the beginning. Investment in time for the plant have been reduced by tenfold, and people have started to ask themselves what they wanted for the future world. And afterwards, we saw an explosion in investment. So it was a good pause. People needed time to think, and many sectors have felt it, and among them, crowdfunding. Julie, do you think that during this pandemic, that the COVID-19 has acted positively for COVID-19? No, it has nothing to do with COVID. It was already foreseen. Well, on the other hand, many people decided to change lives. They realized that we're not much, and that climate, it's the same reasoning. We totally depend on the climate and meteorology. So priorities have changed for many people. Thus, to speak about climate, it's the same reasoning. Aurélien, do you think that we are at a turning point for crowdfunding? Well, I'm neither an expert of crowdfunding, but we do feel that there is a will from the general public. They are no longer in an era where people will trust a brand less than before. The general public want to commit to a cause and less to an entity. And in a testimony, I've received feedback from NGOs, and they increasingly tell me that people want to help, directly help. And the surge of the use of the digital tool, we've seen that, the use of internet, drive-in to shop. So practices have evolved. You can say that these evolving practices will drastically change as for savings or in the way people manage their money. So for all those reasons, I believe that norms, so European norms and laws are evolving on crowdfunding. So it leads me to think that it will go on. This evolution will go on. This trend will go on. Trust is central, and trust has diminished, and on social network are really there is a lot of mistrust, and people consider they have to take part. We always wait from the politicians that they are the charming princes. But why are we always annoyed by politicians? But if we expect magic from them, 2 months before they are elected, we want to hang them on public on the. So we tell us I want to be more responsible of all my money impacts on the world. So I think it does create an effect. I'm not sure it's a positive trend, but it has played a role. And Daniel van Manen, even if you're not an expert of this sector as a whole, same question. In the background, could you enlighten us on the crowdfunding in the Netherlands and establish a comparison with France?
So maybe first, briefly on the COVID impact that we have seen. I think roughly two effects. So many crowdfunding platforms, including Lendehand, had to slow down a little bit. And that was because we first needed to see what would be the effect of COVID on the businesses that we put on our platform. It's true that organizations and businesses, of course, they would want to raise money in times of crisis. But again, then you are back to the point where if we ask citizens to put their savings into a company, we have to make sure that those companies, have a good chance to survive. And in the beginning of the pandemic, it was just so unclear what the impact would be here in Europe, let alone on a bank in Uganda or a solar business in Ghana. So we were wait and see a little bit. So that has resulted in crowdfunding volumes to go down across the board. At the same time, we noticed that whenever we put a project up, that the crowd was very active. They were perhaps even faster, doing maybe higher amounts. And I think that was a result of multiple factors, including the fact that people were at home all the time. They had time, to think about these investments. But probably also what we already mentioned, that people felt that they wanted to contribute to finding a solution and to do something for the world. So it was mixed effects, I would say, but I think lasting, it has created that more people are aware that they, from their homes, from their computers at home, can contribute in a way. On France and the Netherlands, it's obvious that France is a much larger market. I think so. The UK is a very big crowdfunding market, but we do not consider that Europe anymore, I guess. So within Europe, it's for sure France and Germany, which have the largest absolute crowdfunding markets. Netherlands has a higher per capita investment in crowdfunding and awareness of crowdfunding. And what we see as well is that some studies have shown that in the Netherlands there's a quite high degree in general of donations and putting private money to certain social causes. I don't know exactly the background, why there is a difference between the Netherlands and France. One thing could be the tax system, for example. But those are some of the differences that we need to understand better for us to also be active in France. And Aurélien already mentioned that for crowdfunding, there's going to be one very important change, which is there's going to be new EU regulation, which will make it much more easy for crowdfunding platforms to cross borders. So in the future, you will only need one single license for you to be allowed to operate in the entire EU, and that will be a game changer. And that is also why Lendehand is now very much, actively looking to expand to other markets, including and probably starting with France.
Oui. Donc vous parliez du règlement européen.
You are quoting the EU regulation will be enacted in November, so in a few months we will be able to see the effects of this new EU legislation. We've got only 10 minutes left. Can we go beyond by 5 minutes, something like that? We'll still have 20 minutes? Wait, we still have 20 minutes. So this roundtable is also about speaking of the future of what funding leverages to crowdfunding. So, but in turn, could you please, each one of you, say what you could help to encourage people to invest through communication, through national or European policies. It can be through traceability. Who would like to start? Aurélien? I do believe, as I said at the start, I believe in hybrid models. It's a win-win situation if we find partnerships between NGOs, crowdfunding platform. Daniel was saying something very interesting. Not only the investors got stuck or hesitated, but rather the companies we financed. And we saw that on the ground a lot. Subsidies became pivotal for those companies because to the contrary of France and many countries where acted on end-to-end, there is no buffers, there is no subsidies, no loans from the guaranteed by the state or institutional banks. So we could go to institutional banks and we could say we want to work in microfinance. For instance, I quote an example in Afghanistan to produce facial masks. So with customers who had a loan, customers of a microfinance, and if they started being financed by acted to maintain their job and their economic activity, to produce face masks that were then distributed freely to the general population. So very concretely on the ground to combine OCHIS, a microfinance company, and an NGO can give an answer in time of crisis. And I believe in this with between a platform of crowdfunding. So we are thinking between Lend-A-Hand, Acted, and Babylon crowdfunding platform we launched a few years ago, a strategic partnership to work together in this 000 logic, so that together we can be more impactful and that we can disseminate and publicize crowdfunding. So you've marketed this online in this roundtable session. Daniel, same question. What can we do to speed up crowdfunding in terms of communication, of politics?
So what I mentioned, crowdfunding regulation, that will be quite important. For example, right now in the Netherlands, we have a license that is the same license as any large asset management firm, which means we need to report on a quarterly basis an Excel sheet with 40 pages on all sorts of capital requirements, etc., which don't make any sense for a small crowdfunding platform right now. And that causes us a lot of time and effort to comply with the regulations, which were not written and made for us. So this is a big step. Another thing is everybody who's active in the financial industry would know that over the years, know your customer requirements, anti-money laundering, anti-terrorism regulations have become increasingly strict and difficult to comply with. And while we all fully understand the need for this, it seems that these types of measures and regulations always go up and increase, right? And sometimes I think politicians should take a step back and look at what have we done to the industry? Is it still possible for a small bank, for a small crowdfunding platform, for an NGO to comply with all these regulations? And are we not defeating the purpose of what these actors were meant to do? So yes, of course, you need strict regulation, but you also need a human touch and sometimes a little bit of business sense. So I hope, I wish politicians that those insights.
Arthur, même question, assez rapidement parce qu'après il faut qu'on passe aux questions. Vous parlez depuis le début, vous dites depuis le début on ne peut pas tout attendre du politique, c'est un...
You've been saying that since the beginning, we can't expect much from the politicians. So, in your view, what can be done in order to accelerate crowdfunding? Well, in my view, we are all submitted to about 2,000, 3,000 ads per day, and there's a big margin, for the advertisement companies, but we don't have a margin, so it's very difficult to be competitive in an ecosystem where money is needed to be very visible. This is today's reality. So indeed, it's tricky, and in my view, that these things that have a sense, that are meaningful, have to be more meaningful. But we also have, at the same time, to make things more simple, things related to tax and so on and so forth. Whether it is about crowdfunding or these kinds of investments. But as for these solutions, people want to feel useful, but at some point there's not enough information, or the access to information is not sufficient because we're saturated with information. So we have to find the right balance to enable other things to be visible, because it's not possible for us to spend millions and millions as for this market, the ad market. Yes, communication, visibility are also key to develop crowdfunding. Thank you. Now let's switch to the questions from the audience. Thank you, everyone. So 3 different formulas, 3 different solutions of funding. I understand that the challenge for today is to blend them, to make them hybrid, so to speak. So I represent a company, and we're looking into new ways of funding, whether it is crypto money or new modelizations, new modeling. And when it comes to the framework, the scoring and coaching support, that's something that wasn't mentioned, namely the rate of success, because especially when it comes to impact, there are quite the rates of failures are quite high, and this is due to support and not being enough. And Aurélien, I have Aurélien in mind. Of course, there are risky investments because of political disruptions. That's the case, for instance, in Afghanistan. I think that many companies that have disappeared, that were lost. And your project is very impressive, but this shows how, this the will that the citizens have. And also, Arthur, speculation can be a driver. And if we want to have the insurance companies with us, for instance, to complete on these money missing, especially for emerging countries, and especially 90% of these countries are Africa, and the investors also need profitability, and we bet that the people are going to speculate on the SDGs. We also think that we can complement your interventions, whether it is in the form of forms, loan, or investment, with a very high competence in supporting the big companies as for their transformation. We work in partnership with the company's team, but also Matters, that's been working for 14 years in the development of digital products. Now, I would like to know the following thing, although, of course, we'll be able to discuss later of these partnership opportunities. But how do you score your projects? Well, how do you assess the rate of success, especially when it comes to the ecosystems of competencies in Africa? There are 2 different profiles, 2 kinds of profiles related to African entrepreneurs. So informal economy, that can be up to 80% of the economies, which is very high. and also the risky entrepreneurs. The entrepreneur is often going to not to have a wage. It's a very high risk on his or her own life, the life of his or her family, community. But when it comes to investments, often what is missing is human resources, support, this kind of support, and that's the analysis we have today. Maybe it's not complete, but therefore I would like to know what you've put in place in order to reassure, to make the investor feel comfortable, feel at ease and trustful. So as for what you said in Afghanistan, the very risky countries and so on, the microfinance institutions that acted manages are in Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and so on. We have about 1,000 members of staff working constantly on these issues related to supporting entrepreneurs in the long run. And then when it comes to the very specific case of Afghanistan in this, this kind of crisis, it's a very serious one, but it's not the first one that we have to deal with. There will be business models that will have to be hybrid or mixed. In other words, we'll call to funds from the World Bank, systems of guarantees offered, proposed by the EU, and in such a way that maybe we'll go to, the things will be more risky. But it's different from microfinance investment on microfinance in France or Europe. So the loans will be cheaper because we have to take into account the risks. But it's also important to take into account the countries, the emerging countries. And the cost of the debt will tend to increase, be less subsidized, and also at the same time the approach will have to be more and more business oriented, as you said, not so really speculative, but more about the alignment to the practices of a bank and on the ground, on site. And when it comes to the scoring now, I'm going to put ahead the acted part because it's related to NGOs and so on and so forth with different follow-ups, monitorings, project per project. We have like logical frames before the unfolding of the project with follow-up indexes, with people on the ground who are going to assess the things and so on. But when it comes to the finance part, there are KPIs that we're going to follow on a daily basis, and one of the key elements that we look into is the risk portfolio. It's a repayment, if you will, that wouldn't be done in 30 days. So, example, out of the 3 subsidiaries that we have, we're below that level. And why so? Because when we arrive in an area which is too risky, the client may become beneficiary again. That's why I mentioned this concept of hybridation or mixing, both a bit of NGO, a bit of OXUS, and so on and so forth, especially for territories that are a bit risky. Thank you very much for these speeches, very interesting. I work at FAIR. At FAIR company, we've developed a community with solidarity shareholders, with 60 actors based on citizens. And in the same vein of the hybridation, the mixing thing, since we've been doing that since January 2021. And we have this question. From the time when capital is levied from the citizen with a very low dividend, with a very little remuneration or no remuneration, is it possible to be in touch with the institution, the financial institutions, and explain to them, well, okay, there are citizens who are ready to act, but you will have only you will have a very low ROI, return on investment. So anyway, in order to make citizens aware, it's also about giving sense to what they're doing. The actors of the financial industry have to understand that the citizens want to have information, want to know why they do this or that. And if they we think that we managed to have a number of companies who've invested millions of euros, because there are actors who are ready to understand that the citizens need information, need to understand what they do and why they do it and what is done with our money. But anyway, there's tons of greenhouse gas effect, which is not released, has an impact, a huge impact. We know also that these people, these citizens, are aware of the fact that the non-released tons of greenhouse gas has a huge meaning, but also that will have clear indexes. It doesn't have to be full. It doesn't have to be fully financial. And I think that at some point things will come back to order. Two last hands. Can I complete? Can I add on that? Just a little thing I would like to add. If it's about go and get some money, a little money from the institutions, it can be, maybe we can have things a bit different. Acted went to contact associations first and then institutions. We went to them saying, well, hi, we're an NGO, we want to have 5 million. We're going to remunerate that to you for 7 years. And well, in the first place, they didn't take us seriously. It was difficult, but now we've managed to be successful, and we have now 15 million euros of resources, and we remunerated these entities up to 3%. So you see, there are bonds, there are obligations, securities released to complete these fundings. And when it comes to the institutions, there are different funders, and you want to look to search for those who are the most social oriented, and in such a way that we can have access to this kind of resources with a lower cost than that would be for more conventional saving accounts. Hence the interest of the crowdfunding, namely to blend all that. Because at the beginning, when we approach institutional actors, the first answer would be, well, nobody would invest if there is no ROI. But after some time, they would trust us. Because if there are thousands and thousands internally in their own company and also outside doing this, it can be meaningful to them. Any other hands? Hi, thank you very much for this roundtable. I'm at the opposite of the previous speaker. As someone who doesn't know anything about that, I'm going to maybe ask a very naive question. What is the tax? What about tax for participant to the crowdfunding? Because I used to think, it's supporting a project without taking into account any ROI. Now, so my question is there crowdfunding with ROI or solidarity saving account or something? So can you tell more, explain more to people who don't know anything about that, just like me?
I don't know the exact situation in France. I know a little bit. Babylon, you may have heard of the crowdfunding platform here in France that we are currently exploring a strategic partnership with. They have both a model with zero interest as well as a model with interest. And the same holds for Lendland. In our projects, the gross return that you can earn is probably between 3 and 6%. In the case of France, I believe that on the earnings so that 2% or the 3% of interest, there is a kind of tax, probably some kind of wealth tax applicable. The system in the Netherlands works a little bit differently, but I think here it is seen as if it were just any other type of investment, so the returns will have a tax on it. I can imagine, but I'm not sure, maybe Aurélien, you can comment, that for certain types of investments, there would be tax incentives with lower tax rates or maybe some deductible for green investments or so on. So that I don't know for France.
Aurélien, si vous voulez rajouter rapidement, et après on a déjà un peu dépassé la dernière question.
Aurélien, maybe you can add on that. Yes, to my knowledge, there can be lower taxes on some kinds of investments. I'm not an expert in that, but this mechanism in France, which is such that when investing in SMEs in France, systems as well, when it comes to investing on with regards to environmental impact, and also the loan through the platform, as Daniel said, between 3 and 6% of interest for an investment done. So indeed, it's saving account investment. It can be risky, but at least the projects, you know which projects were supported. Last question. We are a social company, no institution supporting us for free. We don't have dividends, but they say that they will have like an interest. However, now to add to what you said, Madam, there are websites where we can invest in companies and there will be a profit, or Babylon that does loans. And I have a question actually when it comes to loans for entrepreneurs in the emerging countries, developing countries. Is there an average amount in mind? Because usually the amounts are low because the risk is limited, but are there platforms enabling higher amounts? Daniel or Aurélien?
$1000, donc c'est très petit.
So the average amount is on the ground is about 1,000 euros. So what we do with Oxus is that we're going to expose to a platform of microfinance at the level of the IMF, in order to cover a number of citizens, entrepreneurs, and the loans can be bigger, can be higher, but this would cover several companies, entrepreneurs. So we work with funds based on several entities on platforms. So that can be an intermediate on that. And what we're talking about now is that if we could remove these intermediates and directly have access to the crowdfunding, it would be more interesting. Did I answer your question? Okay, so now we're going to stop here because we're a bit late. Daniel, over to you. One last word on this question, please. Because you're concerned by this question.
Start later, and we enjoy speaking for a long time.
No problem. There is the question indeed of operational efficiency, and that's why, for example, at Lendehand, we have chosen for the model that Aurélien also explained, whereby we lend to microfinance institutions, mostly 70% of our loans, and those microfinance institutions have a network of entrepreneurs to them. They are closer to those businesses, to those entrepreneurs. They know them, they know the region, so it makes sense that they do the final loan to them. And for us, operationally, it would be very difficult to do it directly to the end borrower. In our case, the microfinance institutions that we work with are typically targeting businesses that have a need for like 5 or 10,000, maybe 20,000 euros in funding. So not really the super micro entrepreneurs of 1,000 euros, but slightly higher, the SME companies as we call them.
Bon voilà, merci beaucoup.
Well, okay, thank you very much. Thank you to the four speakers of Daniel, Aurélien, Julie, and thank you to all of you. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.